My cake is too moist is a common problem people have while baking. Baking a cake is an art, however, sometimes things don't always go as planned. Fortunately, there are some steps you can take to prevent your cake from being too moist. Fixing a moist cake can be tricky, so you want to try and stop the problem before it happens. However, sometimes it doesn't always work out, and you end up with an overly moist cake. Luckily, there are still some steps you can take to save your cake. My cake is too moist. The texture is key to a delicious cake. You want a cake that is fluffy, moist, and tender. You don't want your cake to be too moist, dry, dense, or flat. There is a balance among all the ingredients in a cake that gives it its tasty texture. However, if this balance gets thrown off, then the cake's texture will get messed up. This will give it an undesirable texture. What causes soggy cake? If your cake is too moist, you likely added too many liquid ingredients. This could be from an excess of milk, water, buttermilk, or any liquid you have added to your cake. When there is too much moisture in the cake, the flour and other dry ingredients are unable to absorb all the liquid. This leads the cake to develop a runny texture that falls apart. Not having enough eggs in the recipe is another reason why your cake may be too moist. Eggs work as a binding agent, and when there is not enough, the cake can't absorb all the liquids and hold the batter together. If your recipe calls for oil, this may also contribute to too much moisture if you add too much. This will result in an oily, crumbly cake. What to do? If your cake has too much moisture, the structure will fall apart as you try to cut. Not only will the texture be off, but also the taste of the cake as well. This will lead to a disappointing dessert. If you notice that your cake batter is too moist and runny, you can start by adding more flour. Add 1 to 2 teaspoons at a time until the texture thickens up. You can also add an egg or more baking powder as well. However, if you don't notice your cake has too much moisture until it is already baking in the oven, there is another approach you can take. Try baking your cake for an additional 10 to 15 minutes for it to fully bake. If the middle of the cake is too wet, bake it for up to 15 additional minutes. Add a piece of aluminum foil to the top to prevent it from browning as the middle finishes baking. If the bottom is too moist, add aluminum foil and/or turn off the upper heat of your oven and bake for a few more minutes. When baking the cake for longer, it is recommended to turn the temperature down by about 25 to 50 degrees. This will help the areas that are too moist fully bake without messing up the already baked areas. How to prevent having cake too moist? The easiest way to fix a runny cake that is too moist is to prevent it from happening in the first place. To do this, carefully read the instructions before starting your recipe. Make sure you know how much of each ingredient you will need and measure them out. Be sure to carefully measure out your liquid ingredients to avoid adding too much. Always use liquid measuring cups for liquids and not dry measuring cups. This will help you achieve a more accurate measurement of your ingredients. Bake your cakes in aluminum pans and be sure to use the oven temperature the recipe calls for. If you are using a glass pan, you will need to factor in that it will take longer to heat up. So, if using glass, you will likely need to bake your cake for longer than what the recipe calls for. If you liked this video, don't forget to like and subscribe.